Welcome back. We're on day 32 of this war, and today I want to open with a number from the International Air Transport Association because it is the single most concrete measure of how this conflict is now reaching into the daily lives of ordinary people on every continent. Global jet fuel prices have more than doubled since the war in the Persian Gulf began with IATA, data showing worldwide average jet fuel prices now sitting 104% above where they were last month at an average of $4.65 a gallon worldwide. Asia and Oceania have seen the biggest increase, with jet fuel prices up 134% over the same period. CBS News, 104% in 32 days. Every flight ticket you buy from today is priced against jet fuel that costs twice what it cost on February 27th. Every package shipped by air, every fresh flower, every pharmaceutical, every electronic component that moves by cargo plane is being priced against fuel that doubled in a month. And Korean Air announced it is entering emergency management mode from April because fuel costs that normally represent 30% of an airline's total expenses could more than double that percentage if current prices persist. Now, let's establish what happened today on the water, because it is the most viscerally alarming development of day 32, and it signals a new phase in Iran's maritime targeting strategy. A fully loaded Kuwaiti crude carrier, the Al-Salmi, was attacked by Iranian forces while anchored off Dubai, according to Kuwait state news agency Kuna. The vessel was struck 31 nautical miles northwest of Dubai, triggering fears of an oil spill. Dubai authorities said teams extinguished the fire and all 24 crew members were safe with no oil leakage reported. CBS News, a fully loaded supertanker in Dubai waters, struck by an Iranian drone, 31 nautical miles from one of the world's most commercially significant ports. No oil spill in this instance, but the word fully loaded in the Kuwait Petroleum Corporation statement is the operative phrase. A very large crude carrier fully loaded with oil contains between 2 million and 3 million barrels of petroleum. An oil spill of that scale in the waters off Dubai would be an environmental and economic catastrophe of historic proportions for the entire Persian Gulf region. Iran targeted that vessel. The fire was extinguished, but the targeting decision has been made and documented, and it will be repeated. Let's fact-check the White House's response to this attack because it reveals a significant internal contradiction in the administration's messaging. The press secretary said on Monday that talks with Iran were going well and that Iranian officials now at the negotiating table appear more reasonable than the regime's previous leader. Then, a fully loaded Kuwaiti oil tanker in Dubai waters was struck by an Iranian drone on Tuesday. The same administration that is telling the world talks are going well is simultaneously watching Iran attack commercial shipping in the waters of a country that is not a party to this war, while Iran's parliament formally codifies its authority to charge tolls on ships passing through Hormuz. Iran's Parliamentary Security Commission approved a plan to regulate and impose tolls on ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, with the plan outlining security arrangements to safeguard the waterway financial regulations and rial-denominated tolls for vessels, and the prohibition of passage for vessels belonging to the United States and Israel. CBS News, rial-denominated tolls. Iran is requiring payment in its own currency for ships to pass through international waters. This is not a temporary military tactic anymore. This is a formalized legislative framework that requires recognition of Iranian sovereignty over a waterway that no nation has ever claimed sovereign authority over in the modern era. Now, let's address Trump's threat about Iran's energy facilities directly because it crossed into territory that legal experts are now formally flagging as potential war crimes territory. Experts told CNN that attacks on civilian infrastructure by any side of the conflict would likely constitute a war crime under international law. David Michel, Senior Fellow for Water Security at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, said launching a concerted attack on desalination plants would be a provocative escalation. Laurent Lambert, an associate professor of public policy at the Doha Institute, said if attacks on desalination plants are the beginning of a military policy, and not just mistakes or collateral damage, this is both illegal, a war crime, and a very concerning development, as Gulf countries have only a few weeks of water storage. Amnesty International said the potential for vast, predictable, and devastating civilian harm caused by strikes on energy infrastructure means such attacks carry a substantial risk of violating international humanitarian law. CBS News, war crime. Illegal, vast, predictable, and devastating civilian harm. Those are not the words of anti-war activists. That is a CSIS senior fellow, a Doha Institute professor, and Amnesty International, using the precise language of international humanitarian law to describe what Trump is threatening to do. The White House press secretary said the U.S. military would always act in accordance with the law. That is the official American response to 3 separate expert assessments that the threatened action constitutes a war crime. The International Monetary Fund warned that the war in the Middle East is sparking higher prices and slower growth around the world, writing in a blog post that although the war could shape the global economy in different ways, all roads lead to higher prices and slower growth, and that much depends on how long the conflict lasts, how far it spreads, and how much damage it inflicts on infrastructure and supply chains. Due to Iran's selective blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, the cost of energy is soaring as the world is losing as much as 20 million barrels of oil per day from Middle East producers. The IMF noted how large energy importers in Asia and Europe are bearing the brunt of higher energy costs, and warned that higher food and fertilizer prices are already affecting some countries with low-income economies at risk of food insecurity. CBS News, the International Monetary Fund. Not a think tank, not an advocacy organization. The institution that manages global financial stability and provides emergency lending to countries in economic crisis. 20 million barrels of oil per day lost from Middle East producers. All roads lead to higher prices and slower growth. Low-income economies at risk of food insecurity. The IMF will release a fuller assessment in mid-April during its Washington meetings. Whatever that full assessment says, the preview published today is the most authoritative economic warning produced about this conflict by any institution in the world. Let's talk about what is happening inside Iran on day 32, because the civilian picture is receiving far less coverage than the military and diplomatic picture, and it is the most humanly significant dimension of this war. Powerful explosions were heard in Tehran, and Isfahan was under heavy bombardment overnight, with a video geolocated by CNN showing a series of large explosions in Isfahan, with the minarets of the city's Grand Mosalla mosque visible in the foreground. State media also reported explosions in eastern and western parts of Tehran, with the state-affiliated Fars news agency saying there were initial power outages caused by shrapnel striking a substation. CBS News. The Grand Mosalla Mosque of Isfahan, visible in the foreground of an explosion. That is a 13th century mosque that is one of the most architecturally significant buildings in the Islamic world. UNESCO designated Isfahan's historic center as a World Heritage Site. This channel reported on day 2 that U.S. and Israeli strikes damaged at least 4 cultural and historical sites. The count is now significantly higher, and the documented proximity of strikes to protected historic and religious sites is a matter of international legal record. The Israeli military issued a warning to residents of Tehran, saying it would strike the Vard Avar area in the coming minutes. The online warning was posted on X in the Farsi language, but it is unlikely to have been seen by people in Tehran, as there was an internet blackout in place in Iran since the war began. CBS News Israel issued a civilian evacuation warning that could not reach civilians because America and Israel strikes had disabled the internet infrastructure through which the warning was supposed to travel. That is a documented sequence that is legally significant under international humanitarian law. The obligation to warn civilians before strikes is a requirement of the law of armed conflict. Issuing a warning on a platform that the target population cannot access because of damage caused by your own prior strikes does not fulfill that legal obligation in any meaningful sense. At least 2 people were killed in a U.S.-Israeli strike on an orphanage in Iran, according to state media. CBS News, an orphanage, 2 people killed. CNN reported it as state media reporting, and it has not been independently verified at the time of our production. We are reporting it as Iran's claim pending verification. But the pattern of strikes on civilian facilities, schools, hospitals, cultural sites, orphanages, is now a documented accumulation that independent human rights organizations are compiling in real time for future accountability proceedings. Thousands of people in Iran are using Telegram, an encrypted messaging app, to try to share critical information like locations of airstrikes, what areas lost power, and the extent of the damage. CBS News, ordinary Iranian civilians, are using an encrypted messaging app to crowdsource airstrike location data to stay alive. There is no more direct human expression of what this war looks like from the inside than that sentence. Not a politician's statement, not a military briefing. People using their phones to tell each other where the bombs are falling so they can get out of the way. 4 Israeli soldiers were killed and 2 wounded during combat in southern Lebanon, bringing the total of Israeli soldiers killed during Israel's latest offensive in Lebanon to 10. Israeli strikes on Lebanon have killed 1,238 people since March 2nd, the Lebanese Health Ministry said Sunday. CBS News, 1,238 killed in Lebanon since March 2nd. That is 27 days. In a country that was already economically devastated before this war began, and that now has no functioning tourist industry, no functioning insurance sector for property and businesses, and no access to international credit markets. Lebanon was already in a decade-long economic crisis before the first Israeli strike on March 2nd. Here's where the facts leave us on day 32. A fully loaded Kuwaiti supertanker struck in Dubai waters. No oil spill, but the fire is out, and the targeting decision is documented. Iran's parliament formally codified rial-denominated Hormuz tolls with American and Israeli vessels prohibited. Jet fuel prices doubled in 32 days. Korean Air entering emergency management mode. The IMF warned all roads lead to higher prices and slower growth, with 20 million barrels per day lost. 3 independent legal experts told CNN Trump's energy infrastructure threats risk constituting war crimes. The White House said it follows the law. Isfahan heavily bombed overnight with explosions visible from the Grand Mosalla mosque. Israel warned Tehran civilians on a platform disabled by their own prior strikes. 2 killed in an alleged strike on an orphanage. Thousands of Iranians using Telegram to track airstrike locations. 4 more Israeli soldiers killed in Lebanon. 1,238 killed in Lebanon since March 2nd. April 6th is 6 days away. We are 32 days in, and the IMF says all roads lead to higher prices and slower growth. The White House says talks are going well. Iran struck a tanker in Dubai waters on the same day. We will keep verifying every claim. We will keep counting every cost. Stay with us.